voice interaction. The keyboard and the mouse is going to be replaced or at least supplemented by talking to your devices. And I just really struggle with that when it comes to the PC. It just doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't. And we're not talking about cursing at your PC. That's a different thing.
Hi, and welcome to GeekWire. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop. Microsoft held its Build developer conference in San Francisco this week, and it was basically a fire hose. New AI models, new chips, new developer tools, new devices, new agent platforms, deals with NVIDIA and the Mayo Clinic, and also some progress in quantum computing. It felt like a big company doing its best to keep up, but how much of it was really fully baked? To help answer that question and sort through the news, I'm pleased to be joined this week by Mary Jo Foley, editor-in-chief at Directions on Microsoft, and in her spare time, a contributing columnist for GeekWire. Hi, Mary Jo.
Hi, Todd. How's it going over there?
It's going pretty well. Actually, it's funny you should say that, Mary Jo, because I did want to give an update for regular followers of the podcast. Mark Zuckerberg's boat is no longer in Lake Union.
Oh, man.
So,
I've been following that on your site.
Before we launched, Mary Jo, we were talking about a potential interview that you might do. I hope I'm not giving away things. We won't say who it is. But you were saying that interview might crash the site?
Yeah.
I got to tell you, if we can withstand the traffic to Zuck's boat,
I know. That's
fine.
true. That's true. You got to get on the boat, though. You got to get on the boat and interview who's on the boat.
With Mark.
Right.
With him. That is a new goal. Thank you. Hey, coming up, Mary Jo, since you last joined the podcast, we have started a new tradition, the GeekWire Trivia Challenge, as our last segment. And all I got to tell you, 2 words, code names. So get yourself ready.
I'm scared.
The audience gets... So, Mary Jo, you and I both tuned in to Microsoft Build. This is their big developer conference. Is this kind of the long-term successor to the PDC, the Professional Developers Conference?
Yeah, I would say so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was held in San Francisco this year, and it seemed to me like Microsoft was doing its best to kind of keep up here. A lot of the stuff seemed very early, and we're going to go through it, but I'd just love to get your overall impressions to start. Like, how much of this stuff was actually ready for prime time versus a sneak peek of things that may or may not come out in the future?
I know, that's a great question. And I think it's hard to answer it because of how much things have changed from the early days of Microsoft tech conferences, right? I feel like in the old days at the Professional Developers Conference and some of the other Microsoft tech conferences, you'd see something, you knew it was early, but then you'd say, okay, and we know it's going to not ship until 3 years from now or 4 years from now. But now we're seeing things and it's like, yeah, and this might ship like next week. Who knows, right? And it really does feel like Microsoft's trying to, I wouldn't say freeze the market, but at least show their hand early so they can say, we're here. We have a space in this market.
It seems, though, like it's so competitive, like they're trying to keep up with the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, the Googles, the Amazons. It just makes me wonder how much they're actually going to end up shipping.
I know. And even when something is in preview in the Frontier program, as they call their test program now, it doesn't assure that that's going to ship, right? They could just test it and be like, yeah, we decided we're not going to ship that.
So Exhibit A was something I actually got a chance to see in advance. I got to go over to Redmond last week, and there was only one other person there, Kevin Stratvert, who runs a really good YouTube channel. And I don't know how I got this access, but I did. It was called Project Solara. It's a new chip-to-cloud platform for building agent-first devices. I had a hard time wrapping my head around what exactly this thing was, but it's basically like a reference design that they're coming up with. They had 2 examples. One was a stationary desk device that kind of looked like an Amazon Echo Show on the desk, but ran a bunch of different agents and then docked with a PC or docked with a monitor to become a Windows 365 cloud PC. And then they also had this like next generation employee access badge that could do all sorts of different things like take pictures and log into different services. And all of these had different agents on them. That's the whole idea. It's agents, not apps. What did you make of Project Solara?
I thought that was the biggest surprise of Build, for sure. especially because it's built on Android, the Android open source project platform. I also thought it was very interesting that they already are showing that, like, hey, it's in a reference design position right now. But they did say they're about to go test it with some really big name customers, right? I think Levi's and CVS and some really big customers. So it must be more baked than it looks like it is, so that they can test it at least. I thought it was an interesting way for them to try to carve out a spot when they don't have a phone, right? They keep saying AI's main interface is going to be voice. But if you don't have a phone, what does that mean? And the way they can get around that is we don't have a phone, but we have a wearable and you might
Right.
talk to it, right?
With this badge. But to your point, whenever they talk about this, and it's Stevie Batich,
Right.
who is the technical fellow and the head of their applied sciences group, who's very big on this, voice interaction, the keyboard and the mouse is going to be replaced or at least supplemented by talking to your devices. And I just really struggle with that when it comes to the PC. It just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't. I know they've shown that, right? They've shown it off in ads on TV. They've shown people talking to, Copilot on their PC, but who does that? No one talks to their PC, right?
I don't. If that's actually a great question. If there are people out there who who are talking to their PCs on a regular basis,
Who
I just
are
don't
you?
see it though. Yeah, email Todd at GeekWire.com and we'll do a story about you as this big novelty in the world.
And we're not talking about cursing at your PC. That's a different thing. But talking to it, I don't know. Even though I work at home by myself, I would never talk to my PC. It's just very unnatural for me.
Especially because, you've got the keyboard, you've got the mouse, you've got multiple monitors. I don't know. It
Yeah.
just feels like a very tactile experience.
It
And,
does.
and maybe we're just set in our ways. And there's
Maybe.
a whole generation out there that's coming up and talking to their PCs. But to your point, Mary Jo, this makes tons of sense when you think about them having a device or a series of devices or their partners coming up with devices that are running this Solara platform. But the question that I came in with was, why not just a phone? Why couldn't you just have an app on your phone that did these things? And I have to tell you, they answered it pretty convincingly, at least for me. And the thing that made it very obvious to me was when they had a healthcare scenario. And it was one of these badges. The idea was that the nurse would just go into a patient's room and basically call up the information on the badge, and then the device would record as it went, and it would create a transcript and, basically take all these actions based on the patient visit. And it's like, yeah, you don't want that on your phone, especially not if it's a personal phone.
Right.
So that's where it started to make sense for me.
Also, I don't think we need to remind people, but Microsoft doesn't have a phone of its own anymore. So, if you don't have your own phone platform, it means you're counting on somebody on an iPhone or a Google-based phone to download an app. And Microsoft's already seen with Copilot, that's a challenge, right? Because not everybody wants to put an app from another ecosystem on a phone that isn't part of that ecosystem. So I think that would be a hurdle for them.
I think you're right. But it's also interesting that they're playing to their strength here. They're targeting this toward businesses. This is not a consumer play, at least not out of the gate.
Right.
And you mentioned they've got some big customers lined up. AccuWeather, Best Buy, CVS Health, Levi's, and Target are all supposed to be exploring one or more of these devices coming up. And Microsoft also had this other display in the room that I was in. They could see this Project Solara extending to headphones and watches and all sorts of other different devices. I was telling Stevie when I saw the desk device, I was like, well, Panos just could have stayed here. That didn't get much of a reaction
No.
when I said that to the Microsoft people. Panos Panay, the former Windows and Devices chief, who was basically like Stevie's sidekick.
Yep.
In some ways, they were sidekicks for each other. He, of course, is now running Amazon's Echo and Alexa and even their satellite business.
Yeah,
if I
I know.
understand
That's
correctly.
crazy, right?
So
I'm happy to see them starting with enterprise, and not just because I cover enterprise, but I think they're strong in enterprise. They're weak in consumer. I think they have a better chance of having this adopted by businesses than they do by, consumers and normal people in everyday life.
it's worth reiterating, though, these are basically early concept
Right.
devices. They're
Right.
reference designs. Microsoft itself is not going to be shipping these.
Mm-hmm.
It's naming some partners like Qualcomm and MediaTek that are doing the chips. And obviously, you're going to have some hardware makers come in. But the other interesting thing here is the idea is for it to be very much standard, off the shelf hardware components.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they can spin devices up very quickly under this. And the whole notion is you don't have to develop apps because the agents can just come in and do things. So it plays into this whole notion of speed that we saw at Build, where everything seems to be coming together almost at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, one thing that Stevie Batich said kind of shocked me. He said they were not planning to show this at Build this year. But then Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, came in, saw the demos, and said, hey, why don't you bring this up on stage?
Wow. No pressure, Stevie. About your point on creating a whole ecosystem of devices, you showed me something interesting in the spec for Solara, which is it's actually based on this Microsoft platform called MDEP, the Microsoft Device Ecosystem Platform. So this isn't coming out of nowhere, right? Like they already know how to build a device ecosystem for things that are AOSP based, namely their Teams Rooms devices and things in that group. So they already know how this works, how to build, a platform where people can come in, build their own devices, use all of Microsoft's backend, their security, their governance and all that, and have it all set up as a platform they just plug into. So this is maybe a little further down the pike than it would seem, just like, hey, they're spinning up this brand new thing from nothing. I think they have some background in this and some expertise in this that we may be giving short shrift.
You pointed that out to me, and that was really helpful. And it struck me that, they basically are building on a competitor's platform here.
Right.
But to your point, they've done this before with the Teams Room devices.
Yes.
So these are those devices in the conference rooms at Microsoft and other companies that are basically meant to be very plug and play with their Teams conferencing software. But why not Windows?
I know. That was my first thought. But in a way, if you want this to become a platform that all kinds of device makers will plug into, you're probably not going to go with Windows IoT, right? You're going to go with Android because that's a bigger ecosystem for that kind of device.
It really speaks to that thing that you said earlier, the fact that they don't have a phone. And if you start to look at it this way, it's like the lack of a phone is almost like a symptom of a larger problem where they don't have the platform that extends into the devices like they once hoped. I mean, this was Microsoft's ambition for many years. And while you might point to the cloud and AI as a realization of Microsoft's long-term plans, at the same time, you look at the vacuum in devices and device platforms as kind of one of their long-term failures. Is that overstating it?
No, I mean, remember for a long time, Satya's rallying cry was cloud first, mobile first.
Yes.
So maybe mobile first now is agent first and device first, agent device first, right?
I think you're right. All right. Speaking of AI and Microsoft going its own way and big ambitions, there was another big announcement that caught my attention. Actually, there were a few. We're going to talk about the Copilot super app, or the lack thereof, at least during the announcements this past week. But coming up, Mary Jo, I want to talk about the AI models that Microsoft announced and the manner in which they announced them and what that says about what's happening inside the company. So that's coming up next. All right, welcome back. It's Todd Bishop. I'm pleased to be joined this week by Mary Jo Foley, Editor-in-Chief at Directions on Microsoft, and in case you haven't noticed, a GeekWire contributing columnist. So we're very excited to have Mary Jo writing on a regular basis for GeekWire these days, and it's fun to be able to talk with her on the podcast as well. Mary Jo, what do you make of Mustafa Suleyman? And maybe that's not a fair way to put it up. Let me introduce this. Microsoft unveiled a series of its own in-house AI models this week. And I want to talk about what that means and what Microsoft is trying to do in terms of claiming its independence from Anthropic and OpenAI in particular. But I got to tell you, I cannot stop thinking about the fact, and don't laugh at me, I know this might seem trivial, but I can't stop thinking about the fact that Mustafa and the Microsoft AI team have their own font. They're
You are obsessed with this, by the way.
So you've got, the standard Microsoft font, the whole presentation, all the PowerPoints look the same up there.
Right.
They're in the same style. And then Mustafa comes up and it's like this, serif font with, all the. I bring it up not to obsess about fonts, although I do love fonts. I think it points to a problem inside the company. I think it is a symptom of a problem inside the company. The Microsoft AI team, I think they're a little snobby, Mary Jo. I think they are not so sure about the rest of this company that they're part of. What do you think of that?
I don't think that's far off the mark. I mean, when you call yourself the AI super intelligence team, does it mean you think you are super intelligent? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I've heard some things about things that go on internally, and I haven't sussed it out enough to be able to say anything. But I worry for Microsoft that the MAI division, that group, might be pulling in its own direction too often. And I would not be surprised if this is not a recurring kind of headache for Satya, or at least a concern.
Yeah. Microsoft's always had a history of some people who are, what do they call them? Individual contributors, right? Who they're people who can't really be put under the domain of other teams because they're just going to do their own thing anyway. And I think he falls in that category, right?
I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Okay, so to the actual news. They unveiled 7 AI models built by their in-house superintelligence team, as you said. This is led by Mustafa Suleyman, who, of course, joined a couple years ago as Microsoft AI CEO. The flagship is MAI Thinking 1. It's a reasoning model that Microsoft says is basically even with Claude Sonnet 4.6 and matches Claude Opus 4.6 on a coding benchmark. Mustafa Suleyman's point was that the models were trained from scratch with no distillation from other companies' models. So this gets to your enterprise pitch, Mary Jo. The idea is clean, licensed data. And more than that, he framed it as a step toward long-term self-sufficiency for Microsoft. So they are so dependent in many ways, historically in AI, on OpenAI. And there seems to be a risk of that with Anthropic. But then you have Microsoft coming in with its own AI models. And it seems like that is a big focus here in terms of where they're headed.
Definitely. And I don't think this is surprising in some ways, because if you think about it, Microsoft's MO is not to build a platform that showcases other people's technology. So you knew all along they had to be thinking about, we're going to have a model too of our own. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to undercut the ones that we can offer customers on price. So if you're a big enterprise customer and you come to use Copilot or Cowork or one of these things, and suddenly you pull down the choices of models and you see the prices, you're going to be like, hey, look how much cheaper the ones from Microsoft are than GPT or than Claude. Maybe I should try Microsoft's model. And then if it works for you, why spend the extra money if you can get it cheaper from Microsoft?
Here's the thing on this. I was thinking about this week. This sounded familiar to me, and I suddenly realized why. Amazon did this a year and a half ago with their Nova models.
Ah, interesting.
And so in some ways, Microsoft is behind. And in fact, at the time, Jason Del Rey, the longtime reporter who has been at many outlets, he compared this to the Costco Kirkland brand, where you might go into a Costco and sure, you can pick the Duracell or the Energizer battery, but hey, here's this Kirkland brand for, 2/3 the price. Why don't you go with this? It's basically the same thing. And frankly, it probably comes out of the same factory and it does essentially what you need it to do.
Yep.
And so here you have Microsoft doing the same thing. So it speaks not only to your point about offering the cheaper alternative, kind of the generic house brand in some ways, although, gosh.
Don't tell Mustafa you said that. Oh, he would not like that.
Exactly. But also to the fact that, in some ways, Microsoft is a little bit behind Amazon here on this, which and maybe I'm splitting hairs and being a little too granular, but this does feel to me exactly like what Amazon did
Mm.
2 reinvents ago. So
Interesting. I hadn't followed Amazon's strategy on that closely, but I think Microsoft kind of had to wait for their contract with OpenAI to change before they could go all in on this, right? Because there were all these terms and conditions about basing their technology on OpenAI, and they had paid OpenAI so much money to use it. They probably were like, we want to do our own models, but does it make financial sense? Well, now it does, right? Because OpenAI is out there doing partnerships with everybody else, so Microsoft is probably thinking, okay, now's the time. The gloves are off. Let's go, right?
yeah, it's actually been interesting to see OpenAI with Amazon.
Yeah.
It's almost like the person who has a new love interest in some ways. When I see Amazon and the OpenAI, the chief revenue officer in particular at OpenAI, hearing her talk about the business that they're getting from Amazon's customers for the OpenAI offering that they're able to do now that they're not really, going steady with Microsoft. it's
They're playing the field.
It's kind of interesting to see. They're playing the field, exactly. But you pay so much attention to what big corporate customers, what enterprise customers are looking for. Are you getting a sense for pent-up demand that these companies have been waiting for something other than, OpenAI or Anthropic from Microsoft to dig into?
No, I don't think most companies even have thought all that much about that, because I think they're more sensitive to price, right? And I think as long as the price has been something they are okay with and Microsoft's offering it, they're good. But if Microsoft suddenly is offering it way cheaper and you're looking to try to prove ROI on AI, you're going to be like, wait, let's try that, right?
What about coding here? I know one of the models got into that realm.
Right. I think for the build audience, that was big, right? They announced that one of the models they're building is called Code One Flash, and that's going to be integrated into GitHub Copilot. So I think that makes a lot of sense, because Microsoft's kind of fallen behind with GitHub Copilot lately versus what Anthropic and OpenAI are doing on the coding front. So I think they really had to show something on the coding space, especially to this audience at Build, to indicate that, hey, we didn't forget about that. We have something really exciting coming for all you coders as well.
And it comes at a time when GitHub is really under a ton of pressure, if I understand it correctly. They've had issues with performance and reliability. And just right before Build, Microsoft introduced more of an incremental pricing, more of a pay-as-you-go pricing model for GitHub Copilot. It seems like there's a risk here that Microsoft could fall even further behind Claude Code and Cursor and others. How serious is this situation from your perspective for GitHub and GitHub Copilot?
Well, I think the quality issue is very serious. Like, they can't keep having outages and problems with GitHub Copilot. That's just not going to go, right? But I think Microsoft won't be the only one going to a consumption model here on these kinds of coding challenges, right? All these companies are realizing and starting to cave a little bit because they have been giving stuff away to try to get new customers and build confidence. And you can't just keep giving it away without it being paying for itself. So I think Microsoft's just saying, hey, this is the new reality and this is how this is going to go. And if you want to use GitHub Copilot and the kind of coding model we're building, you're going to have to pay for it. And we're not going to subsidize you. So I think that's just the reality of what's happening everywhere.
This seems like a consistent theme across Microsoft's businesses, where they're going to be charging on a per seat basis, but then also usage on top of that. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's what it seems like, right? It seems like, hey, we're going to charge you a flat user fee, and then we're going to nickel and dime you with all these add-ons that you're going to have to pay for on a consumption basis. So that could be the new way pricing happens in the AI world.
This gets back to something John and I were talking about on the show last week, because it does seem to be a recurring theme across the industry, not just at Microsoft. And John's comparison was to the way Uber was at the very beginning, where they kind of pulled you in with this cheap pricing, got you hooked on the idea of hailing a ride very cheaply, and then kind of slowly ratcheted it up. I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you, last time you were in Seattle, did you try taking the Uber from the airport, Mary Jo?
I
It
never do that. No.
Okay, smart. It's like $100.
I know, just like New
It's
York,
crazy.
right? Just like New
Is
York,
it that
going
bad?
from JFK to Manhattan, it's over $100 in an Uber now. Yeah,
Jeez, that's crazy.
I know.
I want to talk about the super app, Scout, and OpenClaw. Can we do that?
Yes.
Let's do that coming up next. Welcome back. It's Todd Bishop with Mary Jo Foley. We are talking this week about Microsoft Build and all of the announcements Microsoft made and trying to make sense of where the company ends up after all of this, how it fits into the broader industry. Mary Jo, you've been following very closely Microsoft's developments and its work in OpenClaw, in this notion of agent to agent and automation. I got to tell you, this is an area that I've read about. I haven't reported a lot about it. And so I feel like I'm still a novice in this area.
Uh-huh.
Can you give me the lay of the land as it relates to Microsoft and OpenClaw?
Sure, I can try. So I wrote something for GeekWire in May when a vice president at Microsoft named Omar Shaheen announced, "Hey, I've been dabbling with this personal assistant technology based on the open source OpenClaw environment. And I think it would be really cool if we could use it inside Microsoft and inside enterprises." So he just kind of threw that out there and built up a kind of like a skunkworks team inside Microsoft and created something he called Project Lobster, which was based on OpenClaw. Get it? Claw, lobster.
Yeah.
Claw pilot, they can't talk about too. So yeah, they're going all in with the lobster metaphors. But he created this. He started testing it inside Microsoft. People were really excited inside. He as of May 1st, he had 3,000 people inside Microsoft testing what he calls Claw Pilot, which is the team's open claw based desktop environment. Okay, cut to build. Like just 1 month later, they're showing it on stage, kind of like Stevie Batish, right? Like, hey, you guys just started this. Let's throw it up there on the build stage, right? And what's crazy to me about this is OpenClaw, everybody's really excited about it because it gives you all these opportunities to have agents that do things without you constantly having to prompt them. Like you tell an agent to do something and it goes and does all the steps required to make it happen. So that sounds really fun and excellent, but from a security standpoint, everybody in the security environment just thought that was a nightmare, right? Because suddenly you're letting these agents run wild. Like you're not checking on them, they're just doing their own thing. And so for Microsoft, the challenge is if you're going to introduce this into the enterprise, you have to have a lot of guardrails on here. You have to have compliance guardrails, security guardrails, all kinds of things that make sure your OpenClaw environment doesn't contaminate the enterprise environment. So I thought that would take them a while to pull that all together, but no, they have it ready and it's going to go into testing with companies like now. So this is another example of something that not so long ago you'd expect might take them a year, 2 years to actually start putting out there to
3 years.
enterprises, right? Yeah, 3 years. And no, this has been 2 months, right? And yeah, they're going to start testing it with enterprise companies now.
So they announced Scout, which is,
That's
as
what
I
this is
understand
now,
it,
right? This is
yes.
that project, but named Scout. Yep.
And so it's the first of what Microsoft is calling autopilots.
I
Is that
know.
right?
Yeah. So this is going to be really confusing because Windows has autopilot, which means a totally different thing about updating and provisioning Windows machines. But yeah, these are called autopilots, plural, and autopilots mean always on agents. So the first commercially available, or well, I shouldn't say commercially available, the first one that's publicly announced is Scout. But it sounds like there are going to be many more of these always on agents coming from Microsoft and probably third parties.
So what can you do with Scout?
So Scout uses this layer inside Microsoft called Work IQ. So Work IQ is this context layer. It helps you connect to things like your Teams account, your Outlook email, and pull down from those relevant pieces of information that it could use to help you achieve a task. So say you want to say to Scout, could you tell me if I have any meetings that conflict with this in the next 2 weeks? This ongoing series of things I want to schedule. it can help you negotiate the scheduling conflicts and give you advice, or maybe not just even advice, but actually change your schedule for you because you don't need to intervene, and fix your schedule so that there aren't meeting conflicts. That's an example of the kind of thing this could do.
And my understanding is that since it's wired all the way across like Teams, Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, it basically can orchestrate across all of those.
Right.
And so if you tell it, hey, uh, schedule this meeting for me at a time when it doesn't conflict, it can basically read your email,
Yeah.
look at your Teams chats.
Yep.
Even if you haven't scheduled anything, theoretically, it could know that you made a commitment in that time frame.
Right.
This
I know.
sounds cool
It sounds cool but scary, right?
because what else could it do without your knowledge,
Yeah.
or not? Maybe not without your knowledge, but what else could perhaps a hacker or somebody else
I
who
know.
was able to infiltrate your machine have it do on their
Exactly.
behalf?
Exactly. Like say you wanted to tell Scout, help me prepare for this meeting I've got coming up with Satya Nadella. So it'll pull from all your documents, all your past chats with him, anything that you two have exchanged. So if you're a hacker and you can see that, that's not great.
Especially if it's Satya Nadella.
I know, right? Or
You
Mustafa, or anyone, any of those guys, or just anybody in general, right? Like people might be having a salary negotiation. You don't want that like leaking out broadly,
Now,
right?
I'm sure they would be sitting here saying, Omar would be sitting here in particular saying, wait a second, we're not going to do any of that. We'll have security precautions built in.
Right.
How comfortable do you feel with that, just based on what you've read, what you've heard from Omar?
I think they have to do that. I don't think Microsoft would let them spin this up if they didn't do that, right? And one of the things they did talk about at Build is they're building like the sandbox technology so that you could run certain kinds of things like OpenClaw in a sandbox and keep it out of your enterprise. Just have it run isolated in the cloud. And I think that kind of thing would make people feel less queasy about this because they'd be like, okay, at least that's contained in a separate area over there and it's not mixed in with my enterprise environment.
It's fascinating. You know, computers have traditionally been things that we sat down and controlled with a keyboard and mouse. And
Right.
I'm like envisioning what this world is going to be like in 2 to 3 years when we sit down at a Windows PC and it's like almost like you're going to be peering into this active environment that you may or
I
may not
know.
have. It's like looking through the glass at a zoo or
Well,
something,
I know. And then the other crazy part about Scout, and this is just the first of these agents that's going to do this. So they're going to license it like a person, right? So Scout, whatever you call your own version of Scout, it's going to have its own Outlook email address. It's going to
Oh,
have its own Teams presence. It's going to be integrated directly with the Microsoft Graph and Entra ID for governance. So it's going to look like a person, even though it's an agent.
that's interesting.
Right.
I know they've been talking for a little bit now about having agents registered in Entra
Right.
ID.
hmm
And this, though, seems to take that even
It
further.
does. It does. And that's happening for sure with Scout. Like they said this is how this is going to work with Scout.
Okay, so this plays into one of the last things I wanted to talk about, which is the super app concept.
Right.
You were tracking this really closely coming in because in our conversations, this was rumored.
Yes.
And I think you thought it might be announced on
I did.
stage. This and to be clear, what we're talking about here is an app that combines co-work and chat,
Right.
Copilot chat, with some form of automation and perhaps this kind of autopilot tab as well. So you could see Scout inside this one app to rule them all from Microsoft,
hmm
along with Copilot and co-work.
Right.
Why is this important for Microsoft?
Okay, so I am intrigued about this. And yes, I was obsessed like the way you were about fonts. I was obsessed about the super app.
Something that actually matters? Yes, go ahead.
because everybody right before build, well I can't say everybody, but a number of people were getting leaks about this. Like some people even posted what they said were screenshots of it. And I'm like, okay, so this has to be one of the big announcements. Like maybe they're one more thing at build, right? And the idea of the super app is very interesting. So, like you're describing it, it's got all these things that could be part of one Copilot. So there could be tabs along the top or some metaphor like that, where you have chat, co-work, autopilot, probably a coding tab, right? And you just have this one Copilot that would let you switch between all these kinds of things depending on what you want to do. The reason that's important is Microsoft has a million Copilots. They don't have one. They always talk about it like there's one. They have at least, I don't know, 30, I would say. The most prevalent ones are like GitHub Copilot, Microsoft 365 Copilot, and the plain old consumer Copilot that used to be Bing Chat. But then there's also like Dynamics Copilots and Azure Copilot. There's a million of them. So how, if you're Microsoft, do you tell people there's one Copilot? This is how, right? You have one environment and you can do all the different Copilot-y things in the one kind of workplace. So they said it's coming this summer. Satya did say that. So they're going to show it this summer at some point. And I am very interested to see how easy that is for people to negotiate. And does it solve their too many Copilots problem?
What does this do with the divide between consumer and enterprise Copilot?
Right.
Because that's always been the thing that I've struggled to navigate. And like I'll end up using the consumer one because I'm not on Microsoft 365 Copilot. I'm,
right.
Basically I'm using the consumer Copilot. And it's not as full featured as I would want it to be.
Right.
So like, how does the super app potentially address that, do you think?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I'm guessing maybe the chat tab would do that. So Copilot chat is basically the way everybody interacts with Copilots, right? Like you talk to it in the chat window. So maybe the chat will know if you have the correct licensing and permissions to access it as a consumer versus a business. I've been stalking this new guy at Microsoft. His name is Jacob Andrew. Not really stalking Jacob.
It's not stalking.
Not really
be careful,
stalking.
Mary Jo.
Stalking's a scary thing, and I don't stalk people. I've been very
just
intrigued
follow them
about
closely.
I'm following him closely because his job, this guy at Microsoft, his job is to create a unified experience of one Copilot. So this super app is his baby, and I really want to see how he does it and what he does, and does it work? Does it make it seem like there's just one Copilot? Good luck, Jacob.
It's a big task. He's an interesting person because he does not have the traditional Microsoft background. Where did he come from?
He does not. He started with Snap. And so a lot of consumer background, right? Then he went to Greylock Partners. And a year and a half ago, he came to Microsoft to work on branding and marketing. So he's an interesting guy to give the whole, unified Copilot mission to.
Satya Nadella has really revamped his executive team over the past year, and this is one component of that.
That's right.
All right, Mary Jo, I have to tell you, the trivia contest has become my favorite segment of the show each week. and I think this week's might be one of the best. I think you're going to know the answer, but let's take a quick break, and we'll do that when we come back.
Pop quiz, hotshot.
This is GeekWire's Trivia Challenge.
Wouldn't you prefer a good game of chess?
All right, welcome back. Yes, it is time for the GeekWire Trivia Challenge. I'm here this week with Mary Jo Foley. And Mary Jo, I could not have you on the podcast without doing a code name version of the GeekWire Trivia Challenge. What's your history with Microsoft code names? At one point, did you call yourself the code name queen, if I remember correctly?
I did, but I feel so rusty lately. I feel like I'm like not at the point I used to be. I actually was like tracking code names like in a spreadsheet at one point. Yeah, I even toyed with the idea of like publishing them somehow as a book. I don't know, but I never did that, thank God.
All right, so here's the question. And by the way, Mary Jo, it's multiple choice, so very low pressure.
Okay.
So don't worry, just to lower the stress. All right. Build this week was full of colorful code names. Project Solara, Project Rayfin, Fairwater, M-. But back in the day, the code names actually told you something. There were whole families of names with themes. And nobody tracked them better than you, Mary Jo. So here is your trivia question. Microsoft's Windows client releases were named after BC ski resorts: Whistler, Longhorn, Blackcomb. Visual Studio used Puget Sound Islands: Whidbey, Orcas, Camino, and oddly there was a Rosario in there, which was named after the resort.
Right.
So it wasn't an actual island, it was more the hotel.
Right.
I don't know if that signified anything. All right, so here's the question. The Windows CE team, Windows CE was the mobile platform.
All right.
They named their releases after something a little stronger.
I know.
Okay, you do? Okay, well, don't give it away. Let's
won't.
let the listeners play along. Okay, what was the theme? A, Pacific Northwest volcanoes. B, single malt scotches. C, jazz musicians. D, Norse gods. Or E, craft breweries. Now, so again, well, and Mary Jo, I know you know the answer. I had a hunch you might. So again, it's A, Pacific Northwest volcanoes, B, single malt scotches, C, jazz musicians, D, Norse gods, or E, craft breweries. And the answer is, Mary Jo?
Single malt scotches.
That's right. It's B. It's B. Do you remember any of the scotches that they picked?
What was the famous Japanese scotch?
Yamazaki?
Yes.
Is that how you say that?
I
Yes.
think so.
Yes.
Right.
I think that I did a little research here. I believe that was Windows CE 6.0.
Those code names were so fun. Why can't we go back to those, right?
Exactly. That was kind of my point in bringing this up. Yeah. And all the Scotch fans are going to probably cringe at my pronunciations, but Talisker,
Yep.
Jameson, McKendrick, Macallan. I guess when your acronym for your product spells out the name Wince, you've got to come up with something. You got to come
You're going to
up
have
with
something very
cool.
cool to compensate. You do.
All
I miss
right.
those code names. And that's a good point. That's why I tracked them, because once you knew the code name family, you could kind of guess where the product would land, right? It's like when Microsoft was naming Windows distributions after periodic elements in the periodic table. That was fun too, because you could follow along. You knew what the next distribution was going to be that they would build a version of Windows on. It was in the periodic table.
Did it go in order on
Yes,
the periodic table?
it did. Except there are a couple little blips like Chromium, the element Chromium, they couldn't use because of Google. So I forget what they substituted, but they made up some term to substitute.
Interesting. How are they codenaming Windows releases these days? Have they gotten...
Still periodic table. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So could you do some URL hacking where you go in and you just put in the next element?
Maybe. I've never tried that, Todd. I see Todd's afternoon is going to be spent creatively.
No, I'm just going to have Cowork do it. Hey, just go guess all of these addresses
That's
and
good.
come back with what you actually get on the hits. Autopilot. That's what the autopilot is
That's what they're for. Exactly. I need an agent that does code names. That's what I need.
Ooh, perfect. All right, Mary Jo, this is great. Thank you so much. I really just kind of relish the fact that we get to publish your pieces on GeekWire. And
Thanks.
I can tell you from the audience reaction, the reader reaction, people love reading your columns and
thank
just
you.
the insights that you bring to the beat. And when I talk to you, I feel like we both have seen different elements of the planet and we're able to kind of come together and
True.
and compare notes and see where things overlap. So
I agree.
I always enjoy it.
Me too. Same, Todd. Thanks for having me on too. That was fun.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Curt Milton edited this episode. I'm GeekWire co-founder Todd Bishop, and we will be back next week with a new episode of the GeekWire podcast.